the things that I think about in order for an organization to, you know, to replace a human is they need to
Yeah.
they need to prioritize what is that transparency, accountability, inclusivity. Because
Mhm.
if an organization doesn't address that, there's no way they're going to get to that panacea of autonomous agents.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of CodeNinja Global, a podcast dedicated to bringing you key industry insights from some of the most influential thought leaders across the globe. In today's episode, we're diving into the fascinating and rapidly emerging field of Agentic AI. We are exploring how this technology is transforming industries from autonomous decision making to driving innovation in complex systems. And to guide us through this conversation, we are thrilled to welcome Mr. Jaime Basilico, Principal Data and AI Technology Specialist at Microsoft. With over 2 decades of experience, Jaime has led Microsoft's autonomous AI portfolio and has contributed to advancements in large language models and generative AI. His expertise spans industries like healthcare, finance, and manufacturing, where he has helped businesses implement scalable and ethical AI solutions. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome to the show, Jaime. An absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to come on to discuss, the ever increasing topic of agentic AI. It seems to be transforming many different things for many different industries and businesses. So, love to talk about the things that I've seen, as well as how Microsoft is pioneering in this space as well.
Definitely. So, I'll just dive right into it. So you've had an impressive career at Microsoft, I think spanning over 2 decades now. And being in the thick of things, with one of the biggest technology companies, and can you highlight some of the key moments where you could foresee or anticipate the technological disruption, being especially in data and automation?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you mentioned, been here at Microsoft for over 2 decades. It's actually going to be my 25th anniversary coming up in February of 2025.
Wow.
And in that time span, certainly I've seen many different what I'll call pivotal moments within the technology industry. Not only just Microsoft, but as a whole, in things in terms of data. By the way, even before coming to Microsoft, I spent 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry, focused on data platforms, database modeling, database administration work. So even in my early career was centered around how data could be used in terms of transactional as well as analytical systems. And the reason why I mention that is that I've seen a lot of shifts over the years. Obviously in the 90s, hit
Definitely.
into the early 2000s, and that was really the first pivotal shift that I would say is really the concepts of cloud computing. What did that do? That really democratized data access and the power to process large amounts of data, and that could serve any different industry. As I kind of mentioned, I kind of grew up in the 90s working with data, and I kind of remember the mainframe days and the mid-range systems. They certainly had power, but nothing in terms of the way that we could see
Mhm.
the power of the cloud and what that could do in terms of not only scale in terms of processing power, but also scale in terms of
Yeah.
just raw amounts of data that could be analyzed. So really that first shift was cloud computing. That really laid the groundwork, in my opinion, for the emergence of what we could do with machine learning. Now, comment there, machine learning has been around for decades, literally going back to the 50s and some of the initial machine learning capabilities and systems. But it really wasn't until we had this shift to cloud computing to really enable some of the things that we just take for granted today in terms of neural networks and the processing power that's needed behind that. So, it's really the emergence of machine learning and AI based upon cloud computing to allow us to do things like decision-making processing. And it wasn't until that had emerged, and really we're not talking tremendous long periods of time ago, we're talking the mid 2010s, but that allowed us to start the capabilities around neural networks and having these systems. And why is that important? Well, that actually led to the development of what we again take for granted right now, which is the use of those large
Mm.
language models. So if we didn't have the cloud computing, if we didn't have the scale, if we didn't have the ability to introduce AI into the concepts of cloud computing, we wouldn't have the ability of what everyone just jumps on, chat GPT, or, pick your favorite large language model, whether it's Claude or Gemini. But without that change, we wouldn't have, the large language models and the things that we take for granted. Now, in that,
Mhm.
in that time span, I had the ability to work obviously here at Microsoft in some of the early days of not only machine learning and as I kind of alluded to before, and sorry, this is probably a little bit of a broader answer of kind of weaving back in my background and the things that I've seen to, these
Sure.
monumental shifts. But I got to work
Yeah.
in the early days with, building AI based systems, doing the hard coding of writing Python and doing all those things that we take for granted. And again, what we do today, but that allowed me to shift into the things that we're doing today as it relates to generative AI. So using those models, using this AI paradigm shift to do things like unlocking what natural language could do. And from a Microsoft perspective, I was there in the early days for not only working with the OpenAI models, the pre GPT 3.5 models, but really seeing where we are today, where we could take these natural language models and integrate it into just the tools that, at least from a Microsoft perspective, we use every day. That's things like natural language inside of Office, or being able to use co-pilots as AI assistants, or just enabling
Yeah.
things as it relates to data inside of Microsoft Fabric. So anyway, long answer to, yeah, I've seen a lot of change and a lot of pivotal moments. And again, I would say cloud, super important. Couple that with, um,
Yeah.
the integration of AI, and then in natural progression to generative AI.
Mhm.
Those are monumental shifts. And by the way, I think there's a next shift coming, and that's really around agentic AI, which I'm sure we'll get into as we go through the rest of this
Yeah,
podcast.
definitely. Definitely. Exactly. Uh, but before that, I would say that you've definitely seen the concept of AI evolve over time in such a dramatic way, right? In the past few years as well. But for all the practical purposes, it has. I've seen that it has revolved mostly around large language models. Even before Copilot and ChatGPT, we were seeing mobile assistants and speech recognition applications. But with these new models, adaptation has accelerated rapidly. What would you think is right now driving this change?
Yeah. So to me, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, it's basically putting the tools that make it easier for people to just interact with. Now, as you kind of alluded to, I mean, and I mentioned before, artificial intelligence, machine learning, however you want to classify, it's been around for, like I said, decades already. And there's certainly been what I'll call,
Mm,
lock somebody off in the back closet to come out with some, deep machine learning model for prediction. But those are the data scientists. And traditionally, it's been, yeah, let's give a complex problem to a data scientist and have them come back with, that next prediction model to figure out what's next in your shopping cart, right? We've all seen those. Or, tell me and predict what movie I'd next want to see on Netflix. That's a machine learning model underneath the
yeah.
covers. But now when we talk about
Yes.
this
Exactly.
accelerated adoption, it's about how do we get the everyday person, like my brother or my son or my wife, right? They're not in the space of computer science, and they're not doing this on the day to day.
Mhm.
But how can how can we affect those people, let alone just the the workers inside of an organization that are, the frontline people, or the business productivity folks that would benefit for tools like this. And that's really what it comes down to, is the advancements, as I mentioned before, in power and computing have really made the
Mhm.
availability of those models to be front and center with people. And I'll give a couple examples. So again, I'll speak from a Microsoft perspective. The integration of artificial intelligence into what I'm going to call user-friendly platforms is a great
Yeah.
example inside of Microsoft. So Copilot Studio, that's it going to enable, and it is enabling business users to create custom AI solutions without having to write a lick of code, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's a great capability, because now we talk about adoption, we talk about driving use cases. So this gives I'm not going to call it, an expert, or, a pro developer. This is giving the power of being able to create AI based solutions, agents that can do something with, the next system or
Yes.
whatever has already been written, to be put in their hands. The other example here is, just enabling different tasks where I don't want to say I don't even realize that it's AI, but if I'm working within, let's say, Teams to do a meeting, the ability for something
Okay.
like Teams to automatically look at the transcripts and summarize your meetings, that's driving adoption, because now everybody goes into meetings, right? Who wants to take notes? I know I don't, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you don't either. So that's really accelerating what people are now exposed to as far as AI. Now, do people even think that it's artificial intelligence? I will guarantee you that most people don't. They're just saying, hey, this is something that's helping me in my job. Maybe I don't need to take
Yeah.
notes. Maybe I can summarize. Maybe it'll write my email for me, or refine an email. And that's really like
Yeah.
accelerating this adoption, because now it's in everyone's hands, let alone, the cell phone here, right? Um, it's on form factors now. It's not just your computer. It's in the things that people use
Yeah.
every day. And I know me, my cell phone's attached at my hip, and I'm on it all the time. So, it's the form factors
Yeah.
as well, and where this is going. And one last word I would say is like the thought around the business, like how do business grow, how do businesses grow? Obviously they could, hire more people, they could acquire another company, but a real way that businesses will grow is in the way that they innovate. So enterprises are actually adopting these tools to, bring capabilities obviously to their users, but it's also to automate the various different tasks that they have. Maybe it's also enabling additional decision making, or trying to achieve some nirvana around operational excellence. They're doing that with these
Yeah.
AI tools. And I would just say, to me, you can tell I'm kind of excited about this. We're at the infancy stages on what is potentially possible, and I firmly believe
Yeah.
that, basically the sky's the limit. We're going to see a lot of rapid adoption and changing, and really just development in 2025 as it relates to building these agentic systems, because that really is the next level and next wave. And sorry, one last thing I'll say around that. I've worked with a lot of companies,
Please. Please.
obviously
Yeah.
at Microsoft over the years, and what I would say, and I'm going probably back 3 years ago. I could pinpoint what meeting it was. I'm not going to mention who the customer was, but I was actually in Redmond
Mhm.
doing what we call an executive briefing, and this was way before like ChatGPT even came out. It was probably at least a year before that, maybe even a little bit more. We were talking about, well, how can you use natural language processing to enable things from a business perspective? That company did take that innovative route, and they were way
Okay.
before some of their competitors. But what I'm getting at here is that a lot of companies right now aren't thinking about ways of building agents, or doing, more sophisticated based systems. They're still on, oh, I need to create a chatbot that's connected to my data, in a RAG pattern.
Yeah.
That's table stakes. the companies that I see now and the ones that have done that over the last 2 years, doing RAG patterns, building chatbots, they're now at the stage or the precipice where they're saying, what can I do next? And that's where I see this sort of like crescendo that we're about to hit into, which is a lot of those companies that started down this journey or path 2 years ago are now ready to really build this next generation and this next iteration of how do I make more use out of these generative AI systems? How can I build those agents?
Yeah,
So anyway, sorry,
and make
kind
them
of rambling a little
accessible
bit there.
to everyday user.
Yep.
Yeah. As I was saying, figure out how to make it less complex and make it accessible to everyday user. Like you pinpointed the example of even the transcripts and Teams as well. Even when I'm using it, I don't know what the complexities that goes behind it, or it's another agent working on it. I just know, oh, that's another feature, and I have to use it. Don't have to take notes anymore. So yeah, that's I think pretty much depends on the businesses to figure out how they can make it more simple and what more can they do through this technology for everyday
Yeah,
user, for everyday users as well. All
definitely.
right. So agentic AI, the mention has come up, and your focus and expertise has been in agentic AI as well, and it's gaining a lot of attention. Especially as a paradigm shift in the evolution of AI too. For our listeners, who might be unfamiliar, how would you describe the concept of agentic AI, and what would you say makes it different from the traditional AI approaches, that often rely on predefined rules or limited autonomy?
Yeah, if I had to break it down or simplify it into one sentence, agentic AI, to me
Yeah.
at least, is
Mhm.
really systems that are capable of autonomous decision making and performing some action. That's really what an agent is, right? So
Yeah.
how is that different? Yeah, as I mentioned before, like someone just using Chat GPT connected, or at least the GPT models. I'll be a little bit more sophisticated. What most companies that are building applications around these natural language systems, they're using the APIs, and they're using that to build code or build apps. A lot of times they're using the same model to actually build the code. Different story, but they're
Mhm.
still building
Yeah.
an application that's connected to an API to some data, but it just gives a response. That thing is not necessarily connected or being able to take actions on your behalf or a system's behalf. So the thing that's really different here, again, like traditional AI systems, or things like a large language model connected to some data, is that an
Mhm.
agentic AI system can actually adapt to dynamic environments. And you can define what a dynamic environment is. It could be, how do I navigate through a process path? Or the dynamic environment could be, well, how do I connect into isolated or disparate systems based upon where I am in a process? Or it could also be, when I think about agentic systems, it's also where is the human in the loop, or where is the human in that interaction? And by the way, you could have an agent connected with a human, where human basically either checks on what the agent is doing or validates or verifies process steps, or you could remove that person altogether, or remove the human, where this is really where the autonomous agents and the work that they're performing really outshines what a human potentially may do. You got to get through some what I'm going to call ethical AI components first
Okay.
before maybe you get to that step. But anyway, getting a little bit too ahead of myself. So when I talk about what are those differences within agentic AI, again, I come back to an agent or agentic AI can do something that's based upon autonomous decision making, aligned with actions that it needs to perform with some defined parameters. And I'll give an example on this one. Like
Mhm.
within Microsoft, again, I talked about Copilot Studio. Um, we also recently announced that Ignite, which was just last month, the Azure AI agent service, which by the way just went public preview last week. These things allow organizations to build intelligent agents that can seamlessly integrate with other systems. So this is where, when I talk about, well, again, what does an agent do? An agent needs to understand data. It needs to collaborate across platforms. It needs to understand memory. It needs
Mhm.
to potentially learn from their interactions, self-learning. These are things that can be done through our Copilot Studio tooling and the Azure Agent service to be able to build those pieces. So while you're constructing that agent, you're defining what's its action, who can do it, what's the security model connected to it, is there data that agent should be using. So those are all the things. And again, it could be Copilot Studio, it could be something from AWS or Google. Doesn't really matter. It's still the same concept. An agent is going to need different components to actually work or run. And it's all about how I stitch them together as a quote unquote either developer or power user, or even, to be honest with you, from the Microsoft perspective, we give tools even into just the general user to be able to build agents that can do something on their behalf.
Yeah, definitely. And I think agentic AI to me, seems like the next logical step in how AI interacts with us, because I feel like it's no longer about waiting for instructions, but understanding the context and acting proactively, right? And I feel like we're moving toward a world where AI can genuinely share responsibility and decision making. Would you agree, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. And like I said before, it's there's going to be this level of comfort with agents as well as organizations get more comfortable in what they number one, what they can do. But when I say comfortable, it's more around the responsible AI. Do you really want an agent just running off and connecting with all of your back office systems? Maybe, but maybe not at first. It's about getting
Yeah.
comfortable and the appropriate guardrails as well. Like, you want to know what agents are running, what are they touching. So it's going to be a different paradigm in audit, or auditing the way that these different systems run.
Yeah, of course, definitely. So, following up with the introduction of Copilot Studio, it enables businesses to create their own autonomous AI agents. How do you see the capability of customization and customizing and enhancing organizational adoption, and of course, effective implementation of agentic AI into their operational workflows? Because I know it would be different for every organization and every different process.
Yeah, so Copilot Studio is really a game changer inside of Microsoft for building agentic systems. And what I really mean by that is, we've got these two camps. You've got the developer, somebody who's going to be really comfortable opening up Visual Studio and just start writing code. That's not going to be the vast majority. And the way that we think about it from Microsoft is, how do we get to the business users that really know and understand and live day in and day out with, oh, I've got this task. It'd be really good if I could actually automate this task and align this with natural language and be able to take actions in step. Well, that's literally what Copilot Studio is all about.
Mhm.
It's not that pro code um, user tool. It's really a user tool that's meant for the masses. So Copilot Studio really focuses and is a turning point for agentic AI adoption, because it really enables an organization that is focused on building, or let me put it this way, it's an environment that fosters low code and no code development, which is really tailored towards AI agents. And it addresses
Mhm.
specific business needs, whether or not I'm dealing with customer service or supply chain management. And the reason is that as that low code developer, if I want to classify it as a developer, I can build these agents. Yes, that's tied
Yeah.
into my data, but I can also leverage the existing Power Platform ecosystem to connect into different systems. Like I said before, Copilot Studio, it's a tool, but it's a tool in a bigger um, set of tools, which is really the Power Platform. And if you look at Power Platform, which has been around for a number of years, there's out of the box over 1,400 different connectors for connecting into, let's say, something like ServiceNow or SAP. All those things out of the box with Copilot Studio allows those power users to start to build these agents that can connect into all those different systems to be able to do something. So, going back to your question, like how is Copilot Studio helping, to foster, innovation or adoption? It is that. It's because it allows businesses to align these AI capabilities with their unique workflows, and they can build those workflows inside of Copilot Studio that can take actions. So a great example here is I could build inside of, or an enterprise inside of Copilot Studio can build an agent that would monitor sales trends, generates forecasts, and autonomously could adjust inventory levels based upon that real-time data coming in. So, could I do that with existing systems today? Yeah, but I get the ability to bring in natural language to work with, quote unquote. I might build a front end that allows a user or an end user or customer to actually integrate or interact with my systems, that I can go and order some widget, whatever that may be, and I can easily connect that with all my different systems inside of Copilot Studio. So, and let alone, how and where I deploy those things, we call them channels inside of Copilot Studio, but I could do all that. So enabling a power user within a company to start to build those agents is just going to, number one, drive innovation. And then two, by them adopting these technologies, it's going to free up the type of work that individuals do within an organization, and they can now zero in on different types of tasks or analysis, maybe even looking at the outputs of these agents that run in the first place.
Right, definitely. And before we dive into Microsoft role in advancing agentic AI, I have this question that's been circling around my mind about agentic AI, and I think I've been reflecting on how autonomous agents could lead to emergent behaviors when they collaborate, like for example, like swarms of drones optimizing supply chain without direct human intervention. Do you think that this kind of emergent intelligence is like a realistic near-term possibility, or is it still theoretical?
I would say it's somewhere in between, to be honest with you. So theoretical, we've certainly passed that point. Are we at a stage where customers / organizations are going to be comfortable with having these agents run just autonomously? Me personally, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're that far away. We've got to get organizations comfortable with that ability. Now, let me get into some specifics of the tools that are out there. And this is why I say it's somewhere in between. The reason being, like, even if you just look at Microsoft has put forth autonomous agent frameworks. An example is AutoGen. AutoGen's been around. I've been playing with it for over a year. So AutoGen is a framework for not only building agents, but having agents talk to one another. So a recent advancement, and this is not too long ago, it's a subset of AutoGen. It's called Agentic 1. And it's a framework for how multi-agent systems are able to speak to each other to finish or complete complex tasks. So these are really, when you boil it down, these are frameworks for agents to collaborate with each other and human operators. And this goes back to that human in the loop. And this allows, sharing context, delegating tasks to, achieve some common objective, whatever that objective is defined as. So going back to your question, are we at a stage where, these advanced models for autonomous agents interact with each other? Yes, the tooling is there. We've got Agentic 1. And by the way, in Agentic 1, I'll draw some parallels. I'm not all about Microsoft.
Yeah.
I do look at what's also going on in the world. So Google just released their agentic platform, and there's things within that, that are now, trying to line up with what um, OpenAI and what Microsoft has put out there in terms of AutoGen and Magentic One, um, Claude or Anthropic. They've got something called computer use, which again, part of agents. How can an agent actually mimic what a user is doing, not just in terms of natural language, but mimicking what is possible on your computer screen? So I go back to your question of like,
Yeah.
what are the things that are advancing these autonomous agents, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft. Each one of us has, I don't want to call it like it's not definitive yet. It definitely is not what I would say production ready, but we're making strides that not only can agents interact with each other, but they're able to mimic what a user can do on a computer screen. And by the way, when I'm talking about a computer screen, I'm talking about a web UI. Think of the Chrome, whether or not you're actually using Chrome itself, but it's the Chromium based uh, model for browsing. So if you're using Edge or if you're using Chrome, we can actually, these
Okay.
agents through Magentic One, from a Microsoft perspective, can model and mimic what you're doing as far as clicking and or entering in text into a computer screen. Now, the reason why I say this is not production ready, it's dreadfully slow. It's error prone, and I've seen some things on the Anthropic
Yeah.
with Claude, where literally the agent drifted off and started to think about some other stuff as it was going through the computer use. So again, this notion of autonomous agents, yes, you can build it, it's there, but to get to the stage where we're really being able to build things that not only an agent can make some decisions on its own, it could actually build other agents. Yes, that's in the realm of possibility, but also mimic what a user is doing. We're there. Again, like I said, you could do things in AutoGen and Magentic One today, but to really be fully autonomous, I still think we're going to
Yeah.
be a little bit down the road to be able to implement that. But more importantly, the things that I think about, are organizations ready to adopt it and deploy it in production? I still think that's going to be, a year out plus. So time will tell. I know we're recording this at the end of 2024. We'll see what 2025 brings, but I think we're probably at
Yeah.
least
Yeah,
2026 and a little
definitely.
bit beyond that until people really take advantage, or organizations take advantage of these autonomous agent capabilities.
Yeah, I think the pace might bring it earlier than we can anticipate it now.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I mean, we've seen rapid
Yeah.
adoption of many different things, and if you ask people in the industry 5 years ago, how close are we to AGI, or um,
Yeah.
the it's AGI again. It's where computers are at the same level of human intelligence. Um, People would have
Of
said,
human
yeah, we're
intelligence.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
20 years away. My personal belief, AGI is probably 3 to 5 years away. So anyway, probably a little bit more than what we want to discuss now. Maybe that'll be for another podcast.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. All right, let's move into specifically talking about Microsoft's role in advancing agentic AI. Microsoft has been, consistently being at the innovation frontier, especially with the recent initiatives like Azure AI platform enhancements. How would you say the autonomous AI portfolio of Microsoft stands out in today's competitive market?
Yeah, and this kind of goes to what I was alluding to before. We've got um, pro code, or focused on developers, and that's things like you just mentioned, Foundry. So at Ignite, we announced the Azure AI Foundry, which, by the way, is confusing a few folks because Foundry is a platform. It's a software development kit that allows you to build agents or build agentic systems with natural language pretty quick and easily. There's also the Azure AI Foundry Studio, which is the renaming of Azure AI Studio. So this allows, it's a UI again for, I would say it's more the pro code side, but maybe a little bit further in the middle of allowing anybody to build things. But the studio allows me to pull from a model catalog. So it's not, by the way, it's not just Microsoft and our partnership with OpenAI. There's
Mm-hmm.
actually someone just, I have to go back and look at the model catalog, but we had over 1,700 models from,
Okay.
From organizations, obviously like OpenAI, but Microsoft's foundational models. We had the Meta or their Llama models, Mistral, Databricks models. I mean, there's again just a slew of models, and also the partnership with Hugging Face. Now, why do I say that's important? Because you could pick a different model. Yes, there's large language models. There's also small language models. You could look at fine tuning of specific models. So that's super important. And Foundry allows you to pick an appropriate model. What the Foundry Studio allows you to also do, not only do we have the playgrounds in there, playgrounds again to do chat playgrounds. We also have playgrounds that align with other AI services, whether or not you're doing speech to text, text to speech, or even doing vision based models. But what you could also do in Studio is you could start to build programmatic elements through what we call prompt flow. Now, why is that important? Well, go back to what I was mentioning before about agents. Agents need to do something, right? So I can build some logic through prompt flow that I can expose as an endpoint and then use that within an agent that I'm building through the Azure AI Foundry agent service. So this is where we start to go like full circle on the things that I could be able to do. Obviously, the other things in the Foundry Studio is, building my RAG patterns. I could align with different types of data, whether or not I'm using something like Azure AI search or if I'm just pulling from a database. So those are the kind of like table stakes that I need to do. Now, once I do all that within Foundry, I still need to build my agent. And this is where, I talked before about our platform tools. So within Foundry is our ability to build agents. So at a super high level, by the way, so hopefully everyone can actually see this now, but at a super high level, when I talk about what you are able to build inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, it's not just the developer that we're after. It's about a whole complete system for building agents, and it's really a framework. So yes, inside of Foundry, I kind of just pointed out a few things there. Being able to use Studio, being able to use an SDK within Foundry, building agents through the agent service itself. But I still need to like rely on the infrastructure and go back to what I said maybe about a half hour ago. Like, what are the trends and the things that we've seen that really have changed or shifted? Like these pivotal moments. Well, it's still all that cloud infrastructure. In order to do these things about building agents, I need to run it somewhere, right? So, from a Microsoft perspective, that's the Azure cloud. So all the learnings that we've had for the last 20 years on building, cloud-based systems, that is still applicable. So being able to leverage that infrastructure, being able to tie back into security in the world, that's the underpinnings of the agentic framework. And what we then say is, well, it's about how you want to build those agents. Do you want to build it in a low code, no code manner? Well, that's Copilot Studio. Do you want to build that, in a pro code scenario? Again, I'm a developer and I want to, start writing code on my favorite IDE. Well, that might be Visual Studio, and couple that with GitHub to create my projects and repros. So no matter who you are within an organization, you can start to build agents. And I haven't even talked about Agent Builder, which is part of Copilot or M365 Copilot. I'll draw this similarity or analogy, if you will. If you're used to OpenAI and have built a GPTs, very similar in concept with M365 Copilot Agent Builder, because that, in essence, that's what it's doing. So the bottom line is, with this agentic framework, no matter who I am coming into this, I can start to build agents that are then not only deployable but reusable by other aspects of the environment. So, and the one last thing that I'll kind of point out here, which is super important, and I could spend an hour just talking about this on its own. It's this little black box at the bottom here around trustworthy AI. I can build all the agents that I can ever dream up building, but it's about the trust around what is being built. So Microsoft puts a huge focus around responsible AI, and these are really the principles and the safeguards that are embedded to every product. Again, it doesn't even matter if it's agentic AI, the things that we just build into our Azure platform. Well, that carries over into building these agents. How do we think about building things that don't compromise our ethics or don't compromise the security standards? That's super important.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
I'll go one step further. So I'll geek out a little bit here. So, if you look at this last slide, right? We've got a single box for AI Foundry. This slide is obviously what I would call like the 50,000 foot level. It doesn't get into details. Now, I'll go a little bit deeper, and again, this is about building agents within the Microsoft Agentic framework. So we've got, Azure AI Foundry. And again, this is something that was announced at Ignite just last month in November. But if you peel back the covers, what is Foundry, right? Well, it's really a collection of the things that we've had inside of Microsoft for building agents or working with artificial intelligence as it related to natural language processing, or Gen AI. But it brings all these things together and it wraps it into a software development kit. So all the things I just talked about before, like going to a model catalog, being able to pull from open source model or these foundational models, or even industry models. As an example, we released a industry model for healthcare for doing X-ray analysis. That's an industry model. Those are all available to you within Foundry. So whether or not I'm hitting Foundry from the SDK, again, if I'm that pro code developer, or if I'm using the Foundry Studio to connect into those models, I can do that. Now, the core services are things like the Azure OpenAI service. So again, if you're zeroed in on using the GPT 4.0 models or the O1 models, this is a first-class instance citizen inside of the Azure platform. Azure AI Search. This is a great tool when we talk about building search indexes that can go after any type of data, but then also include the ability to do vectorization or vector embeddings against that data, all at the same time being able to use search tools or search models. Again, I don't know how many people are really that deep into search models, but that uses the BM25. So if you've used Bing search, that's the model that's underneath actual Bing search. Couple that with the ability to then now build agents. And this is that Azure AI agent service. And this connects into things like AutoGen. It connects into semantic kernel. And again, we didn't go deep into this, but semantic kernel is the way that I can start to stitch together different aspects or components, whether or not I'm calling into an agent or calling into an Azure AI search or calling into a foundational model that I've constructed. All at the same time, where I kind of mentioned already, trustworthy is core. It's cornerstone. So part of that trustworthiness is content safety as you start to build these agents. And those are things like the rudimentary aspects, like am I protecting against violence? Am I protecting against hate speech? Am I protecting against, graphic
Yeah.
images, as an example? Those are things that are built in, and you could tailor or tweak that as a user, as a developer of this Foundry system. And all the while, the observability. This is, um, use the term ops, whether or not I'm dealing with machine learning ops or LLM ops. This is the concept around that. So how do I evaluate the models? How do I, drive customization across those things? How do I govern these agents that I put out there? Like, and literally, how can I monitor that? Like, if I've got 100 agents running around, I want to know what those 100 agents are actually doing. So
Yeah,
these are all
definitely.
built into the Foundry platform. And another example, which is super important, is jailbreaking. So these large language models that I use and employ inside of an agent, if you're not safeguarding that, I could jailbreak a model, which, by the way, jailbreaking is literally just giving another instruction set and me understanding what you've defined within that large language model and how that agent works. I want to make sure there's some safety net or some um, best way I could say is there's some shield around that agent, around that large language model. And that is built into what Foundry can do in terms of stopping a jailbreak. And the other piece of this, I didn't really mention it yet, but one of the major changes that we released or announced at Ignite is we used to just have Copilot Studio, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, all the power I just mentioned around Copilot Studio for building the agents, it couldn't talk to anything around our AI services. So it was sort of like this disjointed thing. But what we announced and what we're releasing is the Copilot Studio SDK to communicate with all of these pieces I just mentioned under Foundry. So, and I'll give a really great example of this. Prior to Ignite, if you were building something in Copilot Studio, you're building your agent, you were limited to just the GPT model that is connected with Copilot Studio. And by the way, I won't get into all the history, but we only recently moved that to GPT 4.0.
All right.
But what if you want to use the Llama model? What if you want to use the Microsoft 5 model? You weren't able to do that. You are now. So anything that I build within Copilot Studio, and I want to leverage things like a different foundational model, or I want to leverage the Azure AI agent service that's in Foundry, I could do that now through that Copilot Studio SDK connected into Foundry. So that's a real game changer as we talk about, driving innovation within a platform, but then also driving the adoption and the use of that.
Definitely. Yeah,
Sorry,
definitely.
probably went a little long in that explanation, but
No, I think it's truly impressive, and especially I would say in the early stages as well. That's quite impressive to see how Microsoft has progressed like this. So I'll move to the next question. With customization and scalability being very central to the advancement of agentic AI, how do you think these factors can uphold the principles of responsible AI while meeting the increasing demand for enterprise level autonomy?
yeah, as you just said, you need a platform that's going to allow that customization. You need a platform that's going to allow scalability. But if your organization or people don't trust the agents that are being built, I would say it's, why, what good is it? So responsible AI principle is super important. You need to balance, implementing the governance frameworks alongside the ethical guidelines. And certainly tools like Copilot and I mentioned Foundry, they're going to allow you to customize the solution, but they're also going to allow you to do it that aligns with the principles around responsible AI. So I mentioned already things like within Foundry, the content safety, the ability for jailbreaking. There's tools in there for groundedness and understanding model drift. And then there's also, the overarching ML or machine learning ops and LLM ops. But when we talk about like how does Microsoft approach that? Well, we have this notion again around responsible AI. By the way, this is
Mhm.
not just something that we preach. this is also something that we implement internally. And the responsible AI really revolves around 6 different pillars. One obviously is the privacy and security, and the things that we're going to be building into the tools. Is the tooling itself inclusive? It's not alienating different organizations or different groups. Are there accountability capabilities within the tool sets that
Yeah.
either we're building or you're building? There should be transparency as well in terms of being able to trace lineages. The models and the things that you're building should be fair, and then there obviously should be reliability in that. So these are principles, but then it's about how do these principles show up in things that are being built. So we've got a couple of different things. One is the governance. So we actually published a set of governance rules, and if people are interested, I'll probably in the show notes we could go to the links. But there's rules that are aligning to the governance pieces that we've put out. So we actually have a couple of different white papers that I could again I'll share. But from that, we then have training capabilities. And again, these are all free things that anybody could just pick up from the Microsoft site to understand how to apply these different roles and the governance pieces. Now, we don't stop there. We actually then implement that into our various different products. And that's, various different tools. And a great example, as I alluded to before, the ability within the Azure AI Foundry Studio to build content safety, things like the jailbreaking. We also have capabilities of actually, looking at how fair your models, your LLMs that you've implemented are drifting, and how well they're actually grounded in the data and the responses that you deem appropriate. So these are, again, things that are just inherent within the tool sets. Now, I could go even deeper into that. So when you build agents, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that they're running on a secure and trusted platform. So there's things that we do, and again, 3 main pillars. One is this, enterprise data protection. So there's things that we're doing to think about the data that's being used. Think about DLP, or data loss prevention policies. So these are things that I could implement. I can't tell you enough the customers that I've met with over the last year that have started to use Gen AI connected to their systems. They're like, oh, we thought our data was secured and locked down, but now they're starting to see that data creep into some of their responses, or at least people that shouldn't see those responses. So this again goes back to, what are your data policies and how well are they actually being applied, or where you thought that they were being applied. Governance controls, again, this goes back to, all right, great, I could talk about agents themselves, and let alone just the chatbots, but who can see, who can share that data that's being used? How do I set policies for what information or information labels? And again, hopefully every organization is doing this, but you should have some labeling that says, hey, this is sensitive data, this is not. How do I classify this data? So your agent should adhere to those information policies that I've set up against my data. The other thing too is, like, how do I monitor usage of not only users that are interacting with these agents, but also what the agent is doing in and of itself. So within our tooling within Copilot, or the Copilot Studio, we actually have a management control or management plane that allows for the understanding of how well these agents, number one, are being adopted, but then what they're doing. And again, this is where we get into lifecycle management. It's about this full circle of being able to track and manage those agents. So these are things that are being provided through the Microsoft ecosystem, whether or not it's through the Microsoft 365 service boundary, which is where all these things kind of live, as well as then the Copilot Studio and the interaction with those agents. So super important. And again, I'll go back to your question of, how do we think about addressing, security as we're innovating? Well, it's based upon all these different toolings or capability, as well as the quote unquote principles that we align with.
I mean, definitely. Even the concept of responsible AI, it's very fascinating to me, because it seems like it's less about the AI itself and more about how organizations and businesses, design and deploy it. and they might even have to rethink their ethics framework, as well as AI agents continue to become more and more autonomous. So, moving on to discussing the industry applications, industries such as healthcare, manufacturing, they're rapidly integrating agentic AI solutions into their operations. Where do you see the most profound shift happening in the near future, and how, in your opinion, will these industries approach the workflow integrations?
Yeah, in all honesty, I see shifts happening in all industries. You mentioned things like healthcare and manufacturing. They're certainly using and leveraging these agents already today. An example in healthcare, agents are being used to triage patient queries or monitor health data or suggest treatment plans, and they do all this while, again, hopefully aligning with compliance standards like HIPAA.
Yeah.
It's also in other industries as well. I do a lot of work with professional services firms. Think of like the big four, like EY, KPMG, Deloitte.
Mhm.
They're all using these things to eliminate, or in some cases, maybe just reduce um, various different routine tasks, whether or not that's within audit or tax or just overall advisory based services. In manufacturing, agent tools, great example in Toyota. They're utilizing AI to coordinate engineering tasks to reduce their design cycles and improve collaboration. So, I see it across the board. I think any and all, going back to your question, I think any and all industries are going to see advancements. And again, to me, it's every industry. It's about how quick are they going to adopt, though, and it goes back to what I said before. It's about trusting these agents or what's capable within agents. But I'm already seeing this across many different industries.
Yeah, definitely it is. Moving on to the last section, we would like to discuss the future roadmap for agentic AI. I know we've discussed this previously as well, but with AI agents, set to definitely redefine the workplace productivity, especially in ways we can't even imagine right now. What changes do you think are expected in organizational structures, and how will it especially impact the value creation overall?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of change. I mean, no doubt about it. I've heard people say, AI is not going to eliminate jobs. While I believe that's partially true, I think there's going to be some shifts in the way that people work, or at least redefine the roles and shift the way that employees think about doing higher value tasks. I think
Hmm.
along the way, there are going to be some jobs that are reduced. So people need to adapt. I know that there was a quote out there, and I know I'm going to screw up the quote, so I'll just kind of paraphrase it. AI is not going to take away your job, but if you don't know AI, you're not going to have a job, right? So
Definitely.
it's about how you're adapting to it. So organizations are going to be more dynamic. They're going to have cross-functional teams leveraging AI to, again, do what? Drive innovation. So this is definitely going to shift in the way that people need to think about, reskilling the things that they're used to, and or how do they adopt that within frameworks. Let me give one example. Actually, if you could just pull up the slides again. I'll
Yeah,
just give
definitely.
one example that Microsoft has had some work with. So this is an example from McKinsey, and it's recent. This is them leveraging the ability to build agents through Copilot or Copilot Studio. Now, I'm not going to drain this, but basically, if you think about McKinsey or any service-based organization, they get lots of inquiries or lots of emails coming in, and in this case, this was, all right, um, how do I parse an email that comes in to say, oh, this is for this part of our business. Where does that email need to be routed? Who's the most appropriate person? And then summarize the tasks that the customer have, and
Yeah.
then track that. Well, this potentially would have been the job of maybe a couple people or whole department to look through this. So this goes back to my point. If an AI agent, and by the way, this is real, you could look at, watch the YouTube on this one, or the
Mm-hmm.
video. Um, this is real. This is allowing the ability for an agent to automate a task. And if you're the one who was the person who would be doing this, you would be literally out of a job, right? So if you were now that same person who's in this role, you need to think about, all right, well, how do I add the value add into this? Well, that might be taking the summarized um, email and who this is going to, and then adding some additional layering or flavor on top of that. So this goes back to what I was alluding to, is that you as a person within an organization need to think about how you're going to adapt or going to change based upon the type of organizational work that is going to be needed by your organization in the future.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. Right. Moving on to the last section. In your opinion, alone, do you expect agentic AI to replace human decision making in certain business scenarios? And how do you see the balance between human judgment and AI autonomy evolving? And what safeguards should organizations, prioritize to address ethical and practical limitations?
Yeah. So as I alluded to before, most organizations right now are not necessarily trusting 100% of
Hmm.
agents, or at least building. So there's going to be this human in the loop. And that's important because there's going to be some things that either an organization is just not comfortable with, and or the technology is just not there yet for making a full autonomous agent. So there's going to be some decision making responsibilities that a human still wants to remain in that loop for making the crucial decisions, especially where there's what I'll say ethical considerations or the more complex problem solving. Now, me personally, I think this is going to, it's certainly going to change over time. When we think about some of these more complex problem solving or reasoning models like O1, and by the way, there's other companies now coming up with reasoning models.
Hmm.
That's going to help in the way that agents could look at complex tasks and I was just about to say eliminate. They can reduce the human in the loop in that scenario, and maybe at someday, once organizations are comfortable, it could be the elimination of that. So to me, there's got to be this balance between AI autonomy and where that human oversight is, and that needs to be maintained. And there's got to be clear guidelines. There needs to be the continuous monitoring and the overall implementation of the responsible AI patterns that I talked about before. But the things that I think about in order for an organization to, to replace a human is they need to
Yeah.
they need to prioritize what is that transparency, accountability, inclusivity. Because
Mhm.
if an organization doesn't address that, there's no way they're going to get to that panacea of autonomous agents.
Yeah.
Especially when we start to think about a multi-agent paradigm that is going to be calling other agents or building agents on the fly. So organizations definitely need to do that, and until they do, the humans are going to be in this loop. And I kind of foresee that for not just months, but it's going to be years where humans are in the loop. Um, so anyway, that's my personal belief.
Definitely, I think very beautiful. But well, I think Jamie, that wraps up our podcast, and I really have to, thank you for such an insightful discussion. We surely covered fascinating grounds on the future of AI, AI agents, and I'm sure our listeners will be, they will be as intrigued as I am right now about how this continues to evolve and shape industries all around the globe.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how things evolve as well in 2025, and I'm sure I'll have a hand in some of that, at least with some organizations. So hopefully this was
Definitely.
insightful, and happy to
Yes,
be on
yes.
here on another
Yeah,
one in the future if
yeah,
there's
definitely. We would love to have you again. Yeah.
sounds good. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year, Jamie. Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome. Bye bye.